Good afternoon. This is FIDE Senior Trainer and International Master Chess Coach Sekhar Sahu welcomes you on behalf of Sports Authority of Gujarat and Gujarat State Chess Association to this intermediate training session. So let us first I present to you some interesting endgames and some puzzles. In this position, the last move of black was like this, and black has just played f5, attacking the knight. So how should white play now? How should white play?
हजार चेहरों में सिर्फ तुम अच्छे लगे हो.
Hello, Subankar. Now, just black has attacked the knight. How should white play now? What should white do? Every time a master's evaluation is very important. To regain chess mastery, one must be very good in quick evaluation and then execution of the plan. Hello, Tanishq. White knight on e4 is attacked. How should white play now? I want your participation, otherwise I will move forward. I will only discuss. I have already told several times, and I repeat again, that in every diagram, in the opening and middle game, end game, throughout, a player always look for active moves. If there is no activity or no active move available, then you should go for defense. For the moment, the knight is under attack. Of course, normal player will retreat the knight. But instead of retreating, the more correct move is rooks are there. This. So this is winning quickly. Because you will threaten pawn into attacking queen and mate threat, or you can even take the pawn into and take the bishop. So d5, it is very deadly, and now he cannot take the pawn. After d5, he cannot accept it. The threat is too dangerous. So the correct move is d5. A typical pawn breakthrough in the center. Now there is other pawn into is a mate. This is a checkmate. You can see one mate in one. And pawn into knight, as I told you, he will lose the queen. Pawn into will win the bishop. Pawn into a mate threat and winning. So this is winning easily. That means the only move pawn into pawn, but then the bishop check is winning. No. Here pawn into pawn only move, but then bishop check again the only move, and knight e5 is crushing. So a player should keep this theme in mind. Basically, when I am showing you some diagrams, it carries a theme. So when your pieces you have castled, your pieces are in center, you have got the initiative, you have to open up the game, especially when the king in center. This is lost, completely lost. Check, and now only move. You can even play knight into pawn, that is winning, but this is safest way. Rook attacked. Finish. End of the game. So this is very important. Let's move to the next game. Okay, I have selected already in the clipboard. Just a minute. Clipboard, I have already kept it. Oh no, in the clipboard. Now, this is a very interesting game between Botvinnik White and Fischer is Black. You know, Bobby Fischer and Botvinnik, they met only once over the board in the Varna Olympiad. Botvinnik was playing in the first board of the team, Russian team. Fischer was first board. So many players were making rumor that Botvinnik will avoid Fischer. Botvinnik will not play Fischer. But Botvinnik came prepared because Fischer's repertoire was very much fixed. He was playing Nasdorf against Sicilian and King's Indian mostly, or sometimes Grunfeld against D4. So when they came Fischer, he knew Botvinnik came thoroughly prepared for his King's Indian. So he just opted for the Grunfeld defense. And Botvinnik still got a good game, but then the older man blundered and came a pawn down. And it is a bad position. Objectively, the position is winning for Black. However, it is a prestige issue. So the Russian team, they analyzed the whole night, especially led by Grandmaster Geller. He was a teammate. And Geller, in the middle of the night, early morning, he found the correct counterplay to put up a fight. So you can let us see the Geller's analysis, which Botvinnik used and saved the game. Now this is instructive rook handling. Okay. Now Geller's idea, rook. So you have to defend. You cannot play. You have to defend both the pawns. If you push the pawn, then there is counterplay. Now suppose a5, rook b3 is there. So this is very good. Fischer playing correctly. Now this is the one. The idea is to cut off the king. The idea the king is now cut off. So what Black wants to exchange one of the pawns on the queen side and then make it easier. Good move. Now the point is it is trading one pawn to one pawn. Suppose we trade 3 pawns to 3 pawn, 1 pawn left, and very good chance to draw the game. There is a Russian proverb, all the rook endings are drawn. It's not true. Now here, now attacking, now counterplay. So you have to take. So finally, Black has achieved a couple of connected pass pawns. And that too, when the white king is far away. So position is definitely winning. However, let me tell you about chess psychology. When the position is overwhelming and winning, normally players become careless. They make good moves. They don't make the most accurate moves. They relax. That is where the counterplay comes. So Geller's analysis went right again. Pawn check. Now king f6, rook coming here. Why? You have to slow down. You can't push the pawn. So Black wants to exchange one of the pawn and counterplay. So Black will move inch by inch. And now after that he will have just wait. I will just wait. Waiting for him to come move. We're waiting for him to move here. Rook check and draw with like that chances. And if you move the rook check and king g5. So this is what the defense. So here he played king f5. Check. Now again keeping Black tied down. So Fischer finds an active move. Idea again threat forced. Now if you play pawn to b5, this should be draw, because I will trade the important b pawn, not taking. Tartakov said do not take unnecessary pawns. Now this pawn is important. He is running away. So what are you doing with taking this pawn here? After rook into pawn, when you take the, if you take the, this square is unavailable for the rook. The pawn is watching that. So this is just running away. That is why you should not take unnecessary pawn. At the moment, this pawn is on priority. That means h5. That means you see, if you take, the check will pick up the pawn. And it is a draw because both are rook pawns. This is the point of Geller's analysis. Now h5, excellent move. Okay, you can ignore, but you cannot allow a pawn coming to 6th rank. You cannot ignore. Now suppose you play check, I will hide, and now check and take it, or you start pushing. Now he can attack, and now when you push, pawn into pawn, counterplay. So the perfect timing, pawn push, and now check. Now you have to take check, and it's a draw. So perfect timing, and I mean, of course, it is not a dead draw, but the draw is almost apparent. What else? Pawn is to be saved. King. Now this pawn is useless, and I am going to trade these two pawns. This pawn is useless now. Rook pawn. Forced. Now just wait. So black is waiting. White can also wait. Again back. Now he waits again. There is nothing. You cannot give the h pawn. You cannot give the h pawn. So because he will take it, and after, if you give the pawn, suppose you move like this. Okay. Now I will just go here, and now you are forced to leave this. You are forced. Even without the pawn also draw. Even without the pawn also it should draw. So in the game he plays rook, draw. You cannot leave. Now the point is, suppose the king is here, rook is there, and this is the position, this is winning. Or rook on 7th rank, black to play wins the game, because he gets one tempo that he will never get. Draw. So this was a very interesting battle, and Geller's analysis saved the game for Botvinnik and the Russian team. And what lesson we learn? The two rook pawns are useless. Even without the pawn, it's a draw. This is also a draw. Okay, so I will go to the next game. Now, this is acknowledged endgame specialist Vasily Smyslov versus Mantanovic. One top secret of modern chess masters, modern era, I would say the modern chess era started from Botvinnik onwards. So the theme that in normally rook and bishop are superior than rook and knight in end game when the pawns are on both wings. For example, now suppose we remove both the pawns on the queen side. It is extremely difficult for white to win the game. Let us eliminate white's b pawn and black's a pawn and this position, because the black will concentrate only on king side. But now, because the pawns are on both wings, the bishop plays a superior role over the knight. This is a very important theme, and many players resort to this kind of positional advantage. Attack. Now attack. Come back. Well, looking for counterplay. Fixing. Okay, you cannot take that. That will dissolve to a rook ending. You cannot take that. A rook ending imminent. So he goes saving the bishop and king. Taking the pawn is counterplay is there. Still taking the pawn, then counterplay. Draw. So Alekhine said that when the opponent is down, don't allow him to recover. Now black is down. So if you take the pawn, black will recover. he will get the pawn back with counterplay. The b4 pawn will fall or e3 pawn will fall, then counterplay. And now pawn into pawn, and it is easier. Forced rather, there is no other move. The king cannot move, knight cannot move. Forced. And now winning position. The position now king side, it is 3 versus 2, active king, the g5 pawn. So it is winning, but still I will demonstrate. The point is here, it is to land. Here at this position, you can come rook g5. But why not pull the king back and now rook g7? You can just pull the king back. You have to go back. Now one tempo you gain. Now H passer has been created. It is 3-1, and the bishop is superior piece, watching a lot of squares, so there is no counterplay available. Now this is the point is at the moment rook here and push the pawn on the 7th house. Now this is a threat. This is a threat here. Check. Well, you cannot do. Even if you will notice the threat, you cannot, because you come here, the pawn will fall. Rook a7 will come. So only check, and you should resign. Lost position. No answer to RB8. Can you play bishop c6 starting? Bishop c6 starting is the point here. He played here, rook coming. Bishop c6 is not dangerous. You know, if you play rook bishop here, then of course exchange of rook is forced now, but it will be much more harder. With the rook, it is easy to make operation, giving lot of threats. Exchange of rooks will make it more difficult, because the white king is still not in the center. White king is not active. So not the most perfect execution. So this is not best move. So this is the correct way, rook c1. Okay. This is more important than I have done lot of basic endgames in my earlier lectures. So these are exploiting advantage and leading to basic endgames and also planning. So this is a little bit advanced. If you ask me, these are not intermediate, these are advanced level positions. However, we learn. So what is the theme in this position? That black is much superior. The reason is black has bishop pair. 1. In open position. Number 2, the rook is already in the open file. So pair of bishops and active piece. You can see the pressure is also there here. The pressure. Here there is a pressure here. This is also very strong. So definitely black has an advantage. But let us see the execution. So what you should do when you have two bishops? Number 1, you can try to create more weaknesses an opponent can, and at the right time you should exchange the proper minor piece to live with a superior minor piece endgame. A good bishop, bad bishop, good bishop versus bad knight, active rook. So let us see the former world champion. Actually, in fact, in my early career, I used to think, what is the point in seeing the game of Steinis, Lasker and Capablanca, Alekhine? There is no opening theory, and it is not interesting. But when I grew older and I became more mature, and I find out that these 4 world champions, they taught lot of things which many players are not paying attention. So they have showed so much of understanding. So Capablanca, Alekhine, Lasker and Steinis. Of course, the next lot is they improved based on these 4 players like Botvinnik, Smyslov, Petrosian, Spassky, Tal. They improved studying these players' games. So it is very important, we should always see the classics. And starting from Steinitz. Now if you ask me, Steinitz was a favorite player of Fischer. Was Fischer not knowing that Steinitz was old master, not knowing so much opening? But Steinitz firmly believed in fundamental strategy, fundamental principles. He was the first master to lay down the strategic principles. So here Steinitz shows that advantage of bishop pair in open position and active rook in the open file. Forced. Now restriction of a knight. Restriction of opponent piece is a golden rule. Now both the bishop and knight of white, they are robbed from the square. Pawn is watching. Pawn is watching this. So both knight, white knight, bishop cannot enter. So taking away d4 square. Necessary, which is not actually desirable for black, but you don't want to exchange the rook and you don't want to leave the file. So necessary. Okay, so stage 1 has improved, that rooks have been exchanged and the space of black has increased. You can see the knight is restricted, the bishop is restricted. This helps the f pawn to move forward. You can't allow f5, too much space. Pawn into pawn will be much easier for black because he can start space and create a pass pawn, the bishop getting square. So this is much more easier, resistance is less. That is why you should avoid pawn into pawn. You should avoid. So g3. Now fixed. The point is now dominating. The bishop is dominating the knight. That means I told you at right time we can exchange. For example, now exchange of the black square bishop will leave white in a decisive advantage, because once the black bishops are exchanged, the knight is not doing good and the rook will enter. But you do not have to try. You should try to get whatever comes on your way. But this is a theme. Okay, pawn into is bad. Of course, blunder. Pawn into, only move. Now I told you, exchange of dark squares are favorable. So black has two advantages. One, the superior bishop dominating the knight, and the rook is ready to enter, and also a pass pawn being created. He is able to create a pass pawn. There is one more important thing: absence of any kind of counterplay by white. Please note that in the position, suppose white has a target, do some activity on a weak point, so white has nothing. So this is virtually close to winning. But let us see the operation. I don't see a good way to stop rook entry. So this will exchange the rooks. So check, takes. Now it is easily winning, because black has a pass pawn. Of course, suppose you remove knight bishop on the board and the king is, the white has an outside pass pawn. Suppose you remove the minor pieces and make the active king, white will be better. However, that is not happening. King. You cannot halt, so only move, take, and it is winning. Now the king is in the watch of the pawn. King is watching the pawn, cannot move. Now king. This is a point that if you take it, it is bad. King will take and then king will rush towards you. So check is winning. If you play king e2 or king d3, he will take the pawn. Only move. But then pawn push. Only move. Finish. Black is just 2 steps away, 2 squares away. White is still 4 squares. It is lost. Chess is great. With accurate play, it is a draw. I don't think so. I don't think it accurate play draw. The position, it is a wrong conception. This position is terrible. I would say this position is terrible. I told you, right time you exchange the bishop. Okay, let us start it. Pawn into. You have to take bishop into. You cannot take pawn into bishop. I told you exchange the dark square, leave with a strong piece. Now the position is not draw. I don't think so. You try. I am ready to play for black side. You try if you can find any resources. It is hopelessly lost, I think. It is not a draw. What are you doing for the threat? In end game, rook versus bishop is a draw without pawns. Rook versus bishop draw when there are no pawns on the board. I will show you a position today, an end game where rook and bishop is coming with a draw. Okay, next move. Now, this is an excellent example I picked up. The reason is that in end game area, one should not hurry. The quality of the moves. For example, I will tell you so many good moves. World champion played like a real world champion. Botvinnik he maintained the world top #1 place for the 12 years. 12 years. He's a great player. Great in analysis, great in preparation, and also very patient in handling end games. So this is a marvelous example. Botvinnik demonstrated how to exploit a small but persistent advantage. You can see that black has more weaknesses than white. So here white to play attacked. This is the point. The point is now by forcing the king out of center, now white king is centralized. You compare the position of white king and black king. White is better. Compare the rook. Rook is active. Now if you give a check, it is not doing good. King e5. Now a decisive check is coming, pushing away. Then I will create two pass pawns. So this is check is bad. Now if you compare, the king is superior compared to the black king. Rook is superior compared to the black rook. So he plays rook. Now waiting move. This is what exactly he wanted. Now I will tell you, 90% modern youngsters, of course not grandmasters or masters, they will take the pawn. This will give counterplay. Alekhine said, when opponent is down, do not allow him to recover. Now black is down, but when you play rook takes pawn, he will start getting up from the asses. Rook a5 with counterplay. So return to the center. Very instructive. Now because black rook is watching the pawn, you cannot leave it. Because if you go for this, he will take and he will pick up another pawn. So this is important. Centralized pieces. And I think it's all over. You cannot exchange rook into rook because king takes rook is finished, only move. Now the king is going to b4. Not allowing counterplay. Forced. You can see that last 3-4 moves, the black is doing nothing, white has improved his king and the counterplay is starting. Now pawn check is bad. Then you are paralyzed. Now no pawn break. After the check there is no pawn break is coming. It's bad. So force. Where are you going? Go back again. That's it. I improved it more and more. Now if you go back again to rook c6, the position will be bad. Again if you go back rook c6, now he will have some rook, this move and finish. Now save the pawn. One for you, one for me. A pass pawn has been created. Pawn into and king into, one pass pawn has been created. Winning the game. Now the point is you can take and come and how many 5 moves. You take and come 5 moves, and it is also cut off. After that, the rook is there to cut off, and the pawn is just running away. It's all over. If you take the pawn, for example, you have to stop, otherwise mate. Now you can take, and now winning the game. You collect and the pawn will run away. The pawn is running away. Now you go anywhere, I queen, take, and the king cannot catch the pawn. So you cannot go king into pawn. And now other way, now here, rook e1, this dies down. Now the king is statue, because this extra pass pawn will win. You can't move the king, and this already pawn on the 5th rank. He will go all the way to 7th and win the win easily. So in the game here, he played what happened? Don't block the pawn. Push. Unnecessary pawn you should not take. This is unnecessary, no counterplay. So he takes to create a pass pawn, but it is winning. Now cover. Winning. After the move, suppose you push the pawn, you can queen and collect the rook, and on this should be enough. So it is a fantastic demonstration of refined endgame play, and the world champion played real world champion technique. Great. Now I want to ask you, this is Laskar versus Laskar. Of course, Emanuel Laskar was great world champion, and Edward Laskar was also a very strong master. Edward Laskar is from USA, New York, and Emanuel Laskar is actually German player. Actually, originally I don't know, but he was settled in German. I am not sure where he is from. All right. So in this position, what is your evaluation? It is black to play. Laskar versus Laskar. I will discuss Sicilian Rossolimo, but another day. Karthik. Now, what is your judgment of the position? If you consider the material thing, black is little better, because white has got knight and a pawn for the rook, but white has got one positional advantage to connected pawns. So with correct play, black should be able to win the game. But Edward Laskar, he mishandled and allowed Emanuel Laskar to win the game. Mishandled. Now let us see, if it is black to play, how should black play and win the game? Edward Laskar had the advantage. The power of rook. It is not a draw. It is a winning position for black. The point is, the correct move after rook d7, it is black will win the game. This is the correct way. rd7, gradually black will overpower. Black will overpower white. But he played in the game inferior move, rook. Instead of playing rook coming, he played the move rook, which is bad. Now no more win. No more win game now. Because this is the only chance he has to create counterplay. If you delay, the white pawns will start moving. The point, rather forced. See, white's calculation, that is pawn on 7th rank. You don't have to take the knight. And now it is white who is having upper hand. The point is, now after the rook into knight, pawn is queening. The rook's mobility is lost. So only move. I think it is managed to draw. It's a draw. But I will show the win for black. Will you play GSCS senior selection for national? I don't think I will play. If I have to play national, I am directly seeded. If I want to play national, I can play directly. I don't need to play selection. Those who are playing Gujarat team, all the best. So for the national, all right. So in this position, it is important that you play this, how to win this game originally, starting from beginning. Now here, simply rook d7. I think this would win the game. For example, pass pawn. Push. Now push. Now rook. This you have to slow down. That means you gain time. The point is the rook is watching the square and rook is watching both the squares. So you cannot queen. You have to need the help. You need to push the pawn 2-3 moves. Until and unless white pawn reaches on f7, there is no threat. That is 3 moves. But within 3 moves, now black king is coming forward. The rook is watching the square. Lost. Okay, even if you play, not this one, it is this way, not this way. For example, let us calculate pawn push. Now king, now pawn push. King, you cannot come. Rook into knight and winning because pawn is promoting with a check. Queen is coming with a check. You can't play that. That means you have to play pawn push. King into, now pawn push. Now the king moves would win. Because after queen, now queen check. It's queen and rook is too powerful. Okay, make a demonstration. Now maybe here queen check. Now maybe you give a check, and hey, I make a mistake here. I think this check is correct. This check. You cannot come mate. This is check. Rook check and should win. And if you come here, the queen joins. Should win in the game. It should win. So this is important that he should have played in this manner. Rook d7 and winning. But Edward Lasker went wrong and played rook h8 and drew the game. All right. Okay. This position, Floor versus Spielmann. Now the position white is better. Technically white is better because you can see, compare the bishop position, compare the knight position. Now the rook is also watching. There were better rooks. So white is better, the king is able to come. White is clearly superior, but plan. Okay, you cannot blame him. He could have played more patiently, but he wanted to drive the knight. So this will eliminate the bishop. And I told you the theme, rook and bishop versus rook and knight is going to come. Now rook and bishop, rook and knight with pawns on both wings. At right time you exchange the rook, then bishop versus knight. I mean, Fischer demonstrated against Taimano and Capablanca demonstrated many times. But this is one such. Floor was also a great technical player. Now look at the powerful rooks and superior bishop. No counterplay. And we got the desired position. Rook and bishop versus rook and knight. Pawns on both wings and weaknesses. Now this is a target and the bishop is watching the long diagonal. Nothing more than waiting. No counterplay. Black has nothing better than being a watchdog. He cannot leave the knight. Okay, some repetition. After pawn h6, he will be almost paralyzed. Many times grandmaster repeat moves. So this they gain time on the clock as well, and it is psychologically opponent is tortured. Nothing better. You can see the rook is running out of squares. Knight cannot move. Rook cannot move. The move and then g5. And now a pass pawn will be created. Now the rook here actively watching this square. Knight is not moving. And after the pawn is lost, this will come under pressure. And already the king is active. So this is now what else you will do? What else you will do? You cannot go back passively. And after that, bishop will come to c4, then bishop d3, all winning. So he took the pawn. I want your evaluation of the position. How should white play now? How should white play? White to play. Correct move. Correct move. Tirth Parmar, Kanaksri, and g6 winning. The point is the rook is now attacked. So g6 giving a threat to pawn into and at rook into through two threats. Now rook into bishop loses to rook into bishop will win. Now g6 after that rook into bishop will win pawn into pawn. Unstoppable queen. Or you take rook into rook, or you take rook into rook, g7 wins. Unstoppable. In both cases, a queen cannot be stopped. Well done. But anyway, even if you do not take it, even if you do not blunder, it is lost. Okay. You will come here. You will come here. And then maybe, I don't have to play directly. You play bishop to c4, then play pawn to b3. He will wait. Then you play pawn to b3. And next, I will bring the rook. That pressure on the pawn, then the rook is pressure on the pawn. And it will win. It will win the game. Okay. So we should next. White to play. Now I will take you to a certain point. I will take you to certain point. This position now takes rook into pawn. Now bishop. The position white is having a clear advantage. Advantage number 1, that he has a pass pawn on the 6th rank. Advantage number 2, this point is very weak. That means someday the rook will come, and then bishop will come. This is the idea. But it is not coming. It is two weaknesses. So bishop here, rook. So preparing for the threat now. So here he plays rook, stopping the move. Now, so what is your evaluation of the position? It should be winning. Gradually it will win. It is not that easy. He will give a rook check. What should black do now? Now what black will do? You can see that gradually white is making progress. So black just made a waiting move. My question is, shall you wait here at this point? Shall black play bf2 right now? My question is, now bf2 is good move or bad move? What else you will do? Okay, shall we play bf2, then what will you do? My question is, shall black play bf2 now? So I have to take the cough syrup, which is not leaving me. Yes. Chess, Tirth Parmar, chess is great, is correct. bf2 is a blunder. Anyway it is lost, but this is a blunder. Losing immediately. You cannot take the pawn and another pass pawn. You cannot take it, one more pass pawn. But anyway it is slowly going down. So, next. Okay. Next. Now Capablanca versus Ragozin. So, there is a fantastic endgame volume by Seresky, 2 volumes. He has written 2 books, Seresky, about endgame. So in that he gives this example of Capablanca, and he puts the words of Capablanca. Now in this position, the knight, normally rook and bishop versus rook and knight. Here the knight is the boss. Here the knight is the boss. Capablanca said it is simple. You put the rook on the 3rd rank to watch this pawn, and bring the, after pawn f4, you bring the king. It's all over. And the bishop is a dummy here, doing nothing. No target. So in the Seresky's book, Capablanca said it very simple. You put the rook on the c3 square, play f4 and bring the king to e3, it is all over. Now rook c3. And now rook, discover attack. Better you run, only move. Now back to rook c3. Again remind. Now you don't have to repeat. Just now again he is trying to repeat, but white will avoid. Forced, and it is all over. Because if you play king coming there, then knight will enter. You cannot take the rook pawn. You cannot take rook into a3. Check is threatened. And white has made tremendous progress. Should be winning very easily now. The a pawn is moving just quickly, very fast. forced, rather forced again, it's all over. Now you can see the difference. The bishop is playing dummy, king is passive, rook is passive. So you can see, learn all these things. There is no second way. You need to analyze lot of classics and every stage of the game. In the earlier games, we do not learn the opening, but we can learn about opening principles. Opening variations are outdated, but the fundamental logic behind the moves, they are not outdated. We can learn from these world champions, classics. Forced. Now there is no fight left, it's all over. A great game by Capablanca. For example, okay, I will give you a modern game. Okay, I will give you a modern game based on this. Knight is superior when knight is the boss. Okay, just a minute. Give me a little time to pick up. Okay. I would not say that Capablanca's, that last example I showed you, here knight is the boss and rook is open file. So king is active. So of course it is different, but the concept I am talking. The bishop plays no good role. So white to play, you can just summarize how you can take advantage of this. Now black to play. Now white is threatening the rook coming here. White is threatening to bring the rook. So black played here. So this is the square he is targeting. So he played rook. White to play now. Name of the books. Okay. It is comprehensive chess and no. It is Seresky. Seresky has written 2 good books on endgame. What is the name of the book? Seresky. Great author, Seresky. Okay, you find out now what should white do. I told you, knight is the boss here and rook on the open line. So, Tirth Parmar says king f3. No. King f3 will equalize. King f3 will equalize the game. It will be a draw. Don't play king f3. What will you do? You read that book, Seresky. Jitartha Bhatta, e4. No. Bad move. How can you play e4, my friends? You will lose the knight. e4, you will drop the knight. White will drop the knight. Rook into knight. Ganpat ho jayega. e4, rook into knight will come. Vishal Dodia says rook check. Not the best. Knight b4. Not the best. Tanis, you are repeating e4. Pawn e4, you drop the knight. Tanis, e4 rook into knight. गणपत हो जाएगा. Okay. Relief. Not NC5. my friends, you are not, you have to find the correct technical finesse. The only move that will give a winning chance. The only move that will give winning chance. इसीलिए तो कहता हूं कि क्लासिक गेम स्टडी करो. Okay, I also now have to complete lot of diagrams. The correct move is G4 and make